America's national parks are gateways to adventure, offering looks into America's past, present, and future. Known as the Gateway to the West, Gateway Arch National Park is the gap between the smooth, forested areas of the Appalachian Mountains and the towering heights of the mountain ranges of the West. Consisting of 91 acres, the Gateway Arch and its surrounding area has an important role in America's history as a starting point for many journeys west, a turning point in the argument over slavery, and an ending point for a historic exploration trip. Let's explore how America's 60th National Park came to be. Thomas Jefferson had high hopes for America. After becoming the third president of the United States, he bought 827,000 acres of land in the North American wilderness from France in the famous Louisiana Purchase of 1803. The next year, he commissioned Captain Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to explore the vast American frontier he had recently acquired. Lewis and Clark, along with 29 other members, left from the confluence of the Mississippi and Missouri rivers a few miles north of the national park. Over the next 2 years, the expedition, known as the Corps of Discovery, traversed the Missouri River and its tributaries to reach the Pacific Ocean, where they built Fort Clatsop and stayed the winter before returning to the city of St. Louis in October of 1806. After word spread of Lewis and Clark's journey, many excited settlers flocked to St. Louis, which became a major starting point for routes such as the Oregon, Santa Fe, and California trails. Through most of the early 19th century, St. Louis grew into a booming city, boasting trade between steamboats on the Mississippi River and valuables brought back from the West. However, St. Louis soon became a major site for the biggest controversy of the time, slavery. In 1846, two slaves by the names of Dred and Harriet Scott filed a lawsuit for their freedom, and the case was brought to trial in the old courthouse, where they won their freedom. Continued arguments by their previous owner, however, led to the Scotts being put on trial in not only the Missouri and St. Louis courts, but eventually the U.S. Supreme Court, where the judges ruled that the Scotts actually had to remain in slavery after all. However, this landmark case allowed many U.S. citizens to provide further evidence for slavery to be abolished, which would eventually lead to the bloody Civil War just a few years later. Over half a century later, a man by the name of Luther Eli Smith was traveling home to St. Louis by train when he noticed that most of the city's riverfront buildings were in poor condition. Smith believed that if the riverfront was renovated, it could become the perfect place for a presidential memorial to the hard work of Thomas Jefferson, Lewis and Clark, and Dred and Harriet Scott. Smith pushed for the memorial's creation, and in 1935, Jefferson National Expansion Memorial was created. Smith's contributions to the park's founding are remembered at the Luther Eli Smith Memorial Square, which stands in front of the old courthouse. Despite its looming presence over St. Louis, the Gateway Arch wasn't always a part of this beautiful national park. The arch was chosen from 172 designs submitted for a contest in 1947. Architect R.O. Saarinen created a catenary curve to act as a gateway, showing the storied past of the city. Saarinen's design was, in his eyes, the perfect shape to represent the gateway to the west. Construction on the colossal structure began in 1963 and was completed 2 years later in 1965. An interesting feature about the arch is that it is twice the size of the Statue of Liberty in New York and is 630 feet tall and wide. The park remained under the name of Jefferson National Expansion Memorial until 2018, when it was renamed to Gateway Arch National Park. There are many attractions in and around the 91 acres that comprise Gateway Arch National Park, but the biggest of these is the Gateway Arch, in which visitors can take the egg-shaped trams up to the top of the monument. Once there, visitors can see up to 30 miles in all directions out of the small windows at the top. After returning to the bottom, visitors can explore the many exhibits in the underground museum, which detail the events the national park is commemorating. After exiting the museum, the old courthouse can be seen in front of the arch and offers a look into the history of the court presence in St. Louis. Finally, while not a part of the park, a trip across the historic Eads Bridge will give visitors access to the Mississippi River overlook, which offers a unique perspective on this historic national park, as well as giving views of the entire St. Louis skyline. Offering looks into America's storied past, Gateway Arch is a great way to discover America's past, present, and future. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to learn more about America's national parks, feel free to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.